Everyone laughed when the black belt pointed at her, a tiny black girl in a white GI, and said, "How about you fight me?" They thought it was a joke. But what happened next silenced the entire gym. She didn't shout. She didn't boast. She just bowed, calm, focused, and stepped forward. No fear, no anger, just quiet strength. The kind of strength the world almost never sees. In a world obsessed with power, she reminded everyone that real strength doesn't come from your fists. It comes from your heart. This is the story of a little girl who turned doubt into discipline, fear into focus, and taught millions that peace can be stronger than power. Stay till the end, because what she does next will move your soul. You're watching Brainfuel, the channel where real stories ignite real strength. Every week, we bring you powerful tales of courage, kindness, and the human spirit that fuel your mind and move your heart. So hit that subscribe button, and let's feed your mind with fuel that lasts forever. The challenge that shocked everyone. The sound of sneakers squeaking on polished wooden floors echoed through the dojo. The afternoon sun poured through the wide windows, slicing through dust in golden rays. The rhythmic thuds of fists hitting punching bags filled the air, followed by shouts of determination and occasional bursts of laughter. It was just another normal day at Horizon Martial Arts Academy, until she walked in. A small girl, barely 10 years old, stepped inside with her mother. She was tiny, her backpack almost half her size, and her karate gi looked a bit too big. Sleeves rolled up to her wrists, belt tied unevenly around her waist. Her dark curls framed a face that was both innocent and quietly serious. Her eyes were the kind that noticed everything, sharp, observant, and calm. No one paid much attention at first. Kids came in all the time, new students curious about martial arts. But there was something about this moment, something different in the air. At the far end of the room, Sensei Roberts, the head instructor and a fifth-degree black belt, was finishing a sparring demonstration. He was tall, muscular, confident, the kind of man who commanded a room without needing to say much. When he spoke, the students listened. When he moved, the whole dojo watched. He noticed the little girl, too. He smiled. That teacher's smile that tried to be kind but carried a touch of amusement. "New student?" he asked, glancing at the mother. "She's been training a little at home," the mother replied softly. "I was hoping she could try a class." Sensei Roberts nodded. "Of course. Always good to see young energy here." He turned to the class, clapping his hands. "All right, everyone. Quick break." The students, most of them teenagers and adults, relaxed, chatting, and drinking water. Roberts walked over to the little girl. "What's your name?" he asked kindly. "Amara," she said quietly, bowing just like she'd seen others do. "Nice bow," he said, smiling. "You've done this before?" "A little," she answered. Her voice was soft but steady. "All right then, Amara," he said. "How about you show us what you've got?" The class turned to look. A few people chuckled under their breath. One of the boys whispered to his friend, "She can barely reach the punching bag." But Roberts wasn't mocking, at least not yet. He thought it'd be a light-hearted moment, a way to make her feel included. He crouched slightly so he was eye level with her and said with a playful grin, "Tell you what, why don't you spar with me for a second? Just for fun." The gym went quiet. Everyone froze. Was he serious? A black belt against a 10-year-old? Amara looked up at him. Her mother hesitated. "Are you sure?" she asked nervously. Roberts chuckled. "Don't worry. I'll go easy on her. Just want to see her spirit." The mother nodded hesitantly. "Okay." Amara didn't move. She just stared at the sensei for a long second, measuring him. Then, slowly, she untied her shoes, placed them neatly beside the mat, and stepped onto the floor barefoot. Her tiny feet made almost no sound as she walked. The students gathered closer, forming a loose circle. The whispers began again. "This is going to be cute. She's brave, I'll give her that. She's probably going to cry after one move." Robert stood tall in front of her, stretching his arms. He tried to keep it friendly, but deep down, a part of him enjoyed the attention. He had built a reputation as the unbeatable fighter, the black belt no one could touch. And in front of a crowd, even a playful match like this was a way to remind everyone of that. He smiled down at Amara. "All right, little warrior. Show me what you've got." But Amara didn't giggle. She didn't act shy or scared. Instead, she bowed again, a deep, respectful bow, perfect in form, the way only someone truly trained would do. Then she looked up, her expression still calm, her eyes fixed straight on his. For a brief second, the room changed. The teasing smiles faded. The sensei's grin softened. There was something in that child's eyes that didn't match her small frame. It was focus. Pure, undisturbed focus. He felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. "All right," he said, half smiling again to shake off the tension. "We'll keep it light. Ready?" Amara nodded once. The crowd grew silent. Even the sound of the ceiling fan seemed distant now. All eyes were on the two of them, a giant of a man, years of experience in his muscles, facing a little girl whose belt barely held in place. Roberts took a step forward, his stance easy and open. He decided to make the first move, slowly, just to test her reactions. He lifted his hand lightly, pretending to strike in slow motion. But before his hand even moved halfway, Amara's body shifted. Her foot slid back, weight balanced perfectly. Her hands came up, open palms, elbows tight. It was a stance no ordinary beginner would know. The room murmured. Someone whispered, "Did you see that?" Roberts raised an eyebrow. "Nice stance," he said, almost impressed. But he kept going, circling around her playfully, moving his feet the way a predator sizes up its prey. Amara didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She just followed him, eyes steady, breath slow, patient. For the first time in a long while, Roberts felt the faintest edge of tension in his chest. He didn't know it yet, but this wasn't going to be a joke. This moment, the one everyone thought would be funny, was about to become a lesson they'd never forget, because what was about to happen would silence laughter, erase assumptions, and teach every person in that dojo what true strength looked like. And it would all start with one little girl, one unexpected move, and one proud smile from a mother who already knew the truth about her daughter's hidden power. The little girl named Amara. When people first saw Amara, they rarely looked twice. She was small, soft-spoken, and moved with a quiet grace that made her easy to overlook. Yet those who truly paid attention, those who looked long enough, noticed something deeper. There was calmness in her every step, a discipline in her stillness. That afternoon, as she stood on the dojo mat surrounded by strangers, she looked almost out of place. The laughter, the loud instructions, the thudding of kicks against pads, all of it felt too loud for someone like her. But Amara didn't flinch. She just stood beside her mother, clutching her water bottle, watching every move happening inside that gym. Her mother, Danielle, stood proudly beside her, tired eyes, a gentle smile, and a quiet strength that only single mothers seemed to carry. She had worked double shifts all week, yet she didn't want to miss this moment. She knew what this meant to her daughter. "Are you nervous?" Danielle whispered, bending down. Amara shook her head slowly. "No, Mama. Daddy used to say nerves are just your body getting ready to do something brave." Danielle's smile faltered for a second. The mention of Amara's father always stirred emotions she tried hard to hide. He had been gone for nearly 2 years, taken in an accident overseas while serving in the military. He was the one who had first introduced Amara to martial arts when she was just 5. Back then, he would roll out an old training mat in their small living room. He'd teach her basic stances, small kicks, and blocks. To anyone else, it might have looked like playtime between father and daughter, but to him, it was legacy. He used to tell her, "Amara, fighting isn't about hurting people. It's about control. It's about knowing when not to use your strength." She had taken those words to heart. After his death, she practiced alone in her room every evening, copying old moves from videos, repeating his lessons in her head. She didn't train to impress anyone. She trained to feel close to him. That day at the dojo wasn't just another class for her. It was a promise kept. When Sensei Roberts invited her to join, Amara didn't hesitate. She bowed politely and stepped onto the mat. The eyes of the crowd didn't bother her. The whispers didn't reach her heart. All she could hear was her father's voice. "Keep your center strong. Breathe. Let the world move around you." Roberts studied her from a distance. To him, she was just a child, maybe with some confidence, maybe a bit of practice. But nothing could have prepared him for what that child carried within. The gym lights gleamed off the mirrors that lined the walls. Amara caught a glimpse of her reflection, a tiny figure in a white GI that looked too big. She saw the loose belt, the wrinkled sleeves, the untied hair. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe they're right, she thought. Maybe I don't belong here. Then she closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw her father kneeling beside her, adjusting her stance. He'd always say, "You don't need to look strong, Amara. You just need to be strong when it matters." Her shoulders straightened. Her breathing slowed. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't that small, unsure girl anymore. She was a student of her father's spirit, a fighter born from love and loss. Around her, the students kept whispering, unable to understand the stillness in her face. They were used to energy, to showmanship, to loud confidence. Amara's silence made them uneasy. Sensei Roberts called out, "All right, Amara, let's see your stance." Without hesitation, she stepped forward. Her bare feet touched the cool mat. The entire gym seemed to hold its breath. Amara placed her right foot forward, lowered her knees slightly, and raised her arms, not in the typical beginner's pose, but in a balanced, fluid form. Every movement was deliberate, every muscle precise. Roberts blinked. "Interesting," he murmured. "Who taught you that?" Amara's voice was soft, but her answer carried weight. "My father, sir." A few students snickered quietly, thinking she was pretending. Roberts tried to hide his surprise. There was refinement in her technique, something learned through hours of real practice, not just copying from television or playground games. He smiled and nodded. "Let's see what else your father taught you." At that moment, the crowd's amusement turned into curiosity. One of the black belts whispered to another, "She's not moving like a kid. Look at her hands. Steady. No shaking." Her mother watched from the side, a tear escaping down her cheek. It wasn't fear. It was pride. For 2 years, she had watched her daughter practice quietly, refusing to give up, channeling grief into discipline. She had known this day would come. The day Amara would step into a real dojo and show the world what her father left behind. As the tension built, the sound of the dojo faded into the background. It was as if time slowed. All that existed in that moment was a young girl, a memory of her father, and a test that would define her strength. Roberts circled her once, still underestimating her, but intrigued. He raised his hand slightly and joked, "Don't hit me too hard, all right?" The gym laughed again, but Amara didn't. Her face stayed calm, focused. That same quiet energy from before filled the room again. It wasn't arrogance, it was belief. Danielle whispered under her breath, "You've got this, baby." Amara adjusted her stance slightly, just the way her father taught her when he said, "Balance isn't just about your feet, it's about your heart." Her small frame straightened. Her eyes locked on the black belt before her. The crowd had no idea that what they were about to witness wouldn't just be a playful match. It would be a story people in that dojo would talk about for years. Because this wasn't about showing off. This wasn't about proving herself to anyone. This was about honoring her father, proving that everything he'd taught her, every quiet night of practice, every tear turned into discipline, had meaning. And as the dojo lights gleamed in her eyes, and Sensei Roberts raised his hand to begin, Amara whispered under her breath, so softly only she could hear, "For you, Daddy." And with that, her story truly began. 953 words. Cinematic pace, emotional tone, vivid visuals, perfect for YouTube narration with music transitions. The gym's mockery. As Amara stood in the center of the dojo mat, the room buzzed with whispers. What began as mild curiosity quickly turned into quiet laughter. Some of the older students leaned against a mirrored wall, smirking. Others exchanged glances, shaking their heads like they already knew how this would end. She was just a little girl, barely reaching the chest of most people there. Her belt wasn't even tight. Her sleeves dangled past her wrists. She looked fragile, out of place in a room full of adults whose muscles rippled beneath their uniforms. One of the teenage students whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Man, this is going to be funny. She can't even make a proper fist." The guy next to him laughed, covering his mouth, but she starts crying after the first move. Their laughter echoed softly through the gym, bouncing off the mirrors. Amara heard them, but she didn't react. She just stared ahead, still and silent, her small hands folded politely in front of her. Her mother, standing by the entrance, clenched her jaw. She'd seen this kind of moment too many times before. The world laughing at something it didn't understand. Danielle wanted to say something, to protect her daughter from the mockery, but she stayed quiet. Amara didn't need rescuing. Sensei Roberts noticed the laughter too. He smiled, trying to keep the mood light. He didn't mean to embarrass the girl. He just wanted to create a fun moment, a harmless spar to entertain his students. But as he watched her unblinking eyes, that smile slowly began to fade. There was something unsettling about the way she stood there. Not scared, not defiant, just ready. Still, he decided to keep it playful. "All right, Amara," he said, clapping his hands once. "We'll just do a little light sparring, okay? No one's getting hurt. We're just going to see how you move." She nodded once. "Yes, sir." Her voice was steady, clear, and serious. Roberts chuckled. "Good manners. That's what I like to see." He turned to the crowd. "Let's give her some encouragement, everyone." A few clapped half-heartedly. Most just smiled, waiting for the inevitable. Roberts looked back at her. "Okay, ready position." Amara bowed deeply, just as she'd been taught. When she rose, she slid her left foot slightly forward, bent her knees, and lifted her arms into stance, small, controlled, and balanced. The laughter quieted for a moment. Roberts raised an eyebrow. "You practiced this before, huh?" Amara didn't answer. Her eyes stayed locked on his chest, watching every move. Roberts adjusted his belt and grinned, stepping into his own stance. The contrast was almost comical. A towering man in his mid-30s, facing a tiny 10-year-old. "All right," he said, "show me your fighting spirit." The moment stretched. A soft breeze from the open window rustled the paper scrolls hanging on the wall. The smell of floor polish mixed with a faint scent of sweat and focus. Even the air seemed heavier now, like it was holding its breath. Then the whispers started again. "She's not even moving." Maybe she froze. She's scared. But Amara wasn't frozen. She was waiting. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Never rush first. Wait until you feel the rhythm of the other person's energy. Then move like water, quiet, fast, and certain. Roberts tilted his head, amused by her stillness. "All right, don't be shy," he said jokingly, taking a small step forward. "I promise I don't bite." A few laughs scattered around the room. Amara didn't even blink. Her breathing was slow, perfectly measured. Roberts shifted again, circling her like a cat testing its prey. "Come on," he teased. "You gotta move sometime, little one." And then, out of nowhere, Amara's hand twitched slightly. Her eyes narrowed. It was such a small movement, but something about it silenced the laughter again. The black belts watching from the corner straightened their backs. The energy in the room shifted, almost imperceptibly, but everyone felt it. Roberts noticed it too. He grinned, pretending to be relaxed, but for the first time he felt cautious. He told himself it was silly. She was a child. But deep down, something in his instincts whispered that this wasn't going to go the way he thought. Still, he kept it light. "All right, Amara," he said with a half-smile. "If you're not going to make the first move, I guess I'll have to." He took a slow, exaggerated step forward, raising his arm in a mock strike. The audience chuckled again, expecting a harmless dance. But Amara, she didn't flinch. Her gaze followed the movement of his shoulder, not his hand. Her body reacted before her mind even had to think. She shifted her weight, preparing not to attack, but to flow. Danielle watched from the corner, her heart pounding. She knew that stance. She'd seen it before, late at night when her daughter trained alone in their small living room, whispering to the memory of her father. She could almost hear her husband's voice. "That's our girl, calm in the storm." But the others didn't know any of that. To them, She was still just a kid playing pretend. The mockery grew again. Someone in the back whispered, "He's going to end this in 1 second." Another chuckled. "Yeah, one gentle tap, and she's done." Roberts heard it too. He decided to go along with the performance. He moved forward again, a little faster this time, preparing to tap her lightly on the shoulder, a gesture to end it playfully. But just before he reached her, Amara did something unexpected. She breathed out slowly and shifted her left foot half an inch. It was such a tiny movement, almost invisible, but to a trained eye, it was a signal. Her energy changed, and suddenly, the laughter around the room began to fade once more. There was no sound except for the hum of the ceiling fan, the soft squeak of Robert's foot on the mat, and Amara's steady breathing. Roberts froze for a second, caught off guard by the strange stillness between them. The playful air vanished, replaced by something sharper. Respect, though he didn't realize it yet. He smiled again, but this time it wasn't teasing. It was cautious. "All right," he said under his breath. "Let's see what you can do." In that instant, Danielle whispered a small prayer, not because she was afraid her daughter would lose, but because she knew Amara was about to show them something that would change the way everyone looked at her forever. And in that gym filled with mocking smiles and underestimating eyes, no one, not even Sensei Roberts, was ready for what was coming next. The moment before the match, the dojo fell into a strange kind of silence, the kind that only happens before something unexpected, before the world realizes it's about to change. Amara stood on the mat, small and still. The light from the windows poured over her, catching the edges of her white gi, turning her into a figure of quiet focus. Around her, every sound seemed distant. The creak of the wooden floor, the hum of the ceiling fan, even the soft chatter of students faded away. Sensei Robert stood across from her, a practiced fighter with years of experience in his bones. He was used to reading people before they moved, seeing their fear, their hesitation, their body language. But with Amara, he saw none of that. There was no nervous fidgeting, no darting eyes, no shifting feet, just calm. It unsettled him in a way he didn't expect. He had sparred with national champions, with soldiers, with competitors far stronger than this tiny girl. Yet, somehow, this moment felt heavier. He cleared his throat, trying to shake the tension. "All right, little warrior," he said softly. "Let's make this quick, okay?" Amara nodded once, her expression unreadable. Her mother, Danielle, stood near the doorway, clutching her hands together. She didn't speak. Her heart was racing, but not from fear. It was something else, something like pride mixed with anticipation. She'd seen that look in Amara's eyes before, that same calm determination her husband used to have before stepping into a competition. The memory flashed in her mind, her husband, kneeling beside a 5-year-old Amara in their living room, teaching her how to bow before a fight. "Remember," he'd said, his hand gently on her shoulder, "bowing isn't just about respect. It's about leaving everything behind. The fear, the doubt, the noise. Once you bow, it's just you and your focus." Now, in that dojo, Amara took a deep breath and bowed, slowly, deliberately, gracefully. Every eye in the room followed her movement. Even the ones who had laughed earlier grew quiet. There was something mesmerizing about the seriousness in that bow. When she lifted her head again, her gaze locked onto Sensei Roberts. Her eyes didn't waver. They didn't dart away like most children's would. They stayed still, piercing focus and calm. Roberts blinked, momentarily thrown off. It was such a small thing, a look, but it carried weight, a kind of confidence that didn't belong to a child. He straightened his stance, his smile fading slightly. "Okay," he murmured, half to himself. "Let's see where this goes." The students gathered closer. Some whispered softly, "She's really serious." "What's with her eyes?" "She's not scared at all." The sound of their voices drifted away as the moment stretched. The energy in the room changed. Roberts took a step back, adjusting his belt, grounding himself. He clapped his hands once, loud and sharp. "Ready?" Amara's voice came quiet but strong. "Ready, Sensei." Her tone surprised him. There was no childish squeak in it, no hesitation. It carried an echo of discipline, of someone who knew what she was saying. Roberts took his stance. His posture was relaxed but alert, knees bent, hands open, body angled slightly. It was the stance of a fighter who knew he was in control, or thought he was. Amara mirrored him in her own smaller way. Her feet aligned perfectly, her knees slightly bent, her balance exact. It wasn't the stance of a beginner. A murmur rippled through the room. Even the assistant instructors exchanged uncertain glances. One of them leaned toward another and whispered, "She's not faking that. Look at her weight distribution. That's proper technique." The other nodded silently, eyes fixed on the girl. Roberts, sensing the room's growing tension, tried to lighten the mood again. "Don't worry, Amara," he said, smiling. "I promise I'll take it easy." Amara didn't smile back. She simply said, "You don't have to." The words hit harder than any punch. The crowd went still. Even Danielle blinked, caught off guard. For a split second, Sensei Roberts forgot how to respond. He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "All right, fair enough." He raised his right hand slowly. A signal. The assistant instructor, standing by the side, stepped forward. "Ready," he called out, his voice steady. The air in the room thickened. Roberts inhaled. Amara exhaled, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The assistant's hand sliced through the air. "Begin." Roberts moved first. Quick, smooth, controlled. He wasn't attacking to hurt, just a test. He extended his arm lightly, aiming for her shoulder in a harmless tap. A teaching move. But what happened next made the entire room gasp. Amara moved, not backward, not away, but through his motion, stepping into a space with fluid precision, her body twisting just enough to let his strike pass harmlessly by her. Her motion was graceful, almost like a dance, and for a fraction of a second, she was behind him. Robert stopped mid-step, blinking, realizing she had evaded without panic. Perfectly calm. The crowd murmured again, louder this time. "What just happened?" "She dodged him." That was fast. Roberts turned around slowly, smiling now, but not in amusement, in surprise. "Not bad," he said under his breath. Amara didn't reply. She just stood there, breathing evenly, her hands still raised. The sensei studied her carefully now. The light-hearted air was gone. He adjusted his stance again, a little lower this time. He wasn't playing anymore. But before moving again, he looked into her eyes one more time. And what he saw there made him hesitate. He saw no fear, no pride, no desire to win. Just complete focus, the kind he hadn't seen in years, not even from adults. It was like staring into a mirror of pure discipline. And for the first time since the match began, Roberts felt something he didn't expect, respect. The room was silent except for the sound of Amara's slow, steady breathing. From the sidelines, Danielle whispered to herself, "That's my girl." The laughter that once filled the gym was gone now, replaced by a thick, electric tension that everyone could feel, but no one could explain. And as both fighters stood ready again, eyes locked, bodies still, it was clear to everyone watching. This was no joke anymore. The black belt had underestimated her, and the little girl they'd all laughed at was about to teach them what true strength looked like. The fight begins. The moment the word "begin" echoed through the dojo, the air changed. Every eye locked on the tiny figure of Amara, standing across from the seasoned black belt. The polished wooden floor reflected the sunlight slanting through the windows, and dust motes hung in the air like suspended sparks, frozen in time. It was quiet, too quiet. You could almost hear the sound of every heartbeat in that room. Sensei Roberts took the first step. He moved with grace, the kind of practiced ease that only comes from decades of experience. Each movement was controlled, every motion efficient. He wasn't trying to hurt her, just test her reflexes. Maybe play along a little before ending the match with a friendly pat on the shoulder. That's what everyone expected. But Amara wasn't playing. She waited, still as a statue, her eyes reading every detail of his body language. The subtle shift of his weight, the tilt of his shoulder, the small twitch before a strike. Her father had once told her, the body always speaks before the hands do. And now, she could hear that language clearly. Roberts feinted left, then lunged right, his hand slicing forward in a mock jab meant to startle her. But Amara pivoted perfectly, one small step aside, her foot gliding smoothly across the mat as she spun just out of reach. His hand cut through empty air. A soft gasp escaped from the students watching. Robert smiled faintly. "Good reaction," he muttered, regaining his stance. He stepped in again, this time faster. 2 strikes in quick succession, aiming for her shoulder and midsection. Amara blocked the first with her forearm, then ducked under the second, rolling across the mat and coming up light on her feet. The room erupted in a low murmur. The other instructors exchanged startled glances. No one expected this level of technique, not from a child who barely reached Robert's chest. Her movements weren't frantic or wild like most kids try to fend themselves. They were fluid, focused, and intentional. Every motion had purpose. Robert straightened, the playful expression fading. His voice dropped into something quieter, more respectful. "All right," he said softly. "You got some skill, huh?" Amara said nothing. She didn't need to. Her stance spoke for her, balanced, calm, ready. He lunged again, this time quicker, testing her reflexes. A sharp step forward. His arm sliced down in a controlled arc toward her shoulder. Amara sidestepped and tapped his wrist lightly with a backhand block. It wasn't hard, but it was precise, the kind of precision that breaks an attacker's rhythm. Roberts froze mid-motion, surprised by the accuracy of that small tap. She had disrupted his timing, something even skilled fighters struggled to do. A few of the younger students whispered from the sidelines. "She blocked Sensei." "No way. Did you see how fast that was?" Danielle's hands trembled as she watched. Pride flooded through her chest, but she stayed silent, her eyes wide with emotion. She remembered her husband saying once, "Amara learns through observation. She doesn't need to talk much. She listens with her eyes." And that's exactly what she was doing now. Roberts exhaled slowly, adjusting his GI belt. This wasn't funny anymore. It was humbling. He had started this sparring match to make a point, maybe to teach a lesson about confidence or focus. But the lesson was turning around on him. This little girl was teaching him something. He decided to push her a little, not to dominate, but to test her true limit. His movements quickened. He threw a low kick toward her shin, followed by a controlled sweep designed to off-balance her. But before his leg could reach its mark, Amara shifted her stance. Her foot slid just enough to break his angle. She placed her palm lightly on his knee, redirecting his energy without force. It was the perfect application of Aikido-like redirection, using her opponent's strength against him. Robert stumbled slightly, catching himself before he fell. The room went dead silent. For a moment, all anyone could hear was the sound of Amara's slow, rhythmic breathing. Her small chest rose and fell evenly. Her gaze never broke. It wasn't arrogance. It was awareness. And in that awareness, Robert saw something deeply familiar. The kind of focus that only came from pain, discipline, and endless practice. He took a few steps back, nodding slowly. "You've trained before," he said softly. Amara finally spoke. "My dad taught me." The crowd grew even quieter. Danielle's eyes shimmered. Roberts nodded again, his tone shifting completely. "He taught you well." He raised his stance again, but this time with genuine respect. He wasn't facing a child anymore. He was facing a martial artist. The match continued, this time like a dance. Robert struck, Amara countered. She moved with grace and speed, her tiny frame weaving between his attacks like water flowing around a rock. She wasn't overpowering him. She was outthinking him. Every dodge, every step, every turn felt deliberate. At one point, Roberts feinted with his right hand, a common trick to confuse opponents, but Amara didn't fall for it. She stepped inside the motion, catching his arm lightly and tapping her fist against his chest in what would have been a clean point in competition. The dojo gasped. She had just scored, clearly, cleanly, respectfully. Roberts froze, looking down at the small hand that had just touched his chest. Then he smiled, a slow, genuine smile that carried both shock and admiration. He stepped back and bowed deeply. The assistant instructor called, "Point, Amara!" And for the first time, Applause broke out around the room. Students who had laughed earlier were now clapping, some even cheering. A few whispered to each other in disbelief. "I can't believe she did that. She just scored on Sensei. She's amazing." Amara bowed back politely, her expression still calm. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't showing off. It wasn't victory to her. It was discipline. Robert straightened, rubbing his chest lightly, still smiling. "You've got a gift, young lady," he said, his voice filled with warmth now. "And a good teacher, I see." Amara nodded once. He said never to fight to win, just to learn. Those words hit everyone in the room. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Even Robert stood there quietly, processing the humility of that statement. The man who had started the match as a joke now felt honored just to have shared the mat with her. And as the round ended, the once casual sparring match had turned into something much deeper, a moment of truth, respect, and revelation. The entire gym had witnessed it. A small girl showing that strength isn't about size, power, or pride. It's about heart, focus, and the courage to step forward when the world underestimates you. And as she bowed again in the round, the sound of applause rose once more, louder, fuller, filled with awe. The same people who had laughed at her were now standing in respect. Silence, respect, and realization. The applause didn't start all at once. It began as a soft, hesitant clapping, one pair of hands, then another. But within seconds, the sound filled the entire dojo, echoing off the walls like a wave of thunder. The energy had shifted completely. Where there had once been laughter and disbelief, there was now awe. Everyone in that gym knew they had just seen something extraordinary. Amara stood there, still as a stone. Her small hands were folded neatly in front of her, her breathing steady. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't even aware of how deeply she just moved everyone around her. She had simply done what her father taught her to do. Stay calm, stay focused, and show respect. Sensei Roberts bowed deeply toward her, and this time, the bow wasn't out of politeness or formality. It was real, a bow of humility. A silent apology for underestimating her, for thinking this was going to be a joke. As he straightened, he exhaled slowly, his voice carrying the kind of honesty that only comes after being humbled. "You reminded me what martial arts is really about," he said softly. "Discipline, honor, and heart." Amara bowed again in return, her voice quiet but steady. "Thank you, Sensei." It wasn't loud, but the words carried. Everyone heard them. The other students, who just minutes ago were whispering and giggling, now stood silently in a half-circle around the mat. Their faces showed a mixture of respect and disbelief. Some of them even looked embarrassed, remembering how they had laughed when the match began. A young boy near the back, maybe 12 years old, whispered to his friend, "She's amazing." His friend nodded. "Yeah, I don't ever want to fight her." Even the assistant instructors, who had spent years teaching under Roberts, were speechless. They had seen fighters come and go, seen pride and ego ruin potential. But this little girl had reminded them what humility looked like, through action, not words. Danielle, standing near the entrance, felt tears rising behind her eyes. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She was afraid that if she did, the moment would break, like waking up from a dream that felt too good to be real. Her husband would have been proud. He always said that true strength was quiet, the kind that didn't need a shout to be heard. And right now, Amara was living proof of that. Sensei Roberts took a step forward, kneeling slightly so he could meet Amara's eyes at level. He smiled gently. "Your father must be a great teacher," he said. Amara nodded, her expression softening for the first time. He was, that one word, was hung in the air like a whisper of memory. Roberts blinked, realizing what it meant. He didn't ask questions, but the respect in his eyes deepened. He straightened up and faced the rest of the class. "What you all saw today," he said firmly, "is the real spirit of martial arts. It's not about strength. It's not about showing off. It's about control, about understanding yourself." He turned back toward Amara and continued, his voice carrying the weight of humility. "I came into this thinking it would be a fun little joke, a way to lighten the day. But I was wrong. and I'm glad I was. The students listened quietly, hanging on every word. The lesson wasn't just for Amara, it was for them too. Roberts looked at her again. You didn't fight to win, did you? Amara shook her head gently. No, Sensei. I fought to learn. Those words hit him harder than any punch could. He smiled again, his voice warm now. And you taught me instead. The room went still again, not out of awkwardness, but reverence. You could almost feel everyone reflecting on their own pride, their own moments of doubt, their own underestimations of others. Danielle's hands trembled again, but this time was from pride that burned deep in her chest. Her little girl had done something incredible, not just physically, but emotionally. She had walked into a room full of people who didn't believe in her, and she changed their minds without saying a single harsh word. One of the assistant instructors stepped forward. Sensei Roberts, he said softly, should we post this on the dojo's page? I think people should see. Roberts shook his head. No, not yet. The assistant blinked. No. Roberts smiled, glancing at Amara. Some lessons aren't meant for cameras. They're meant for hearts. Those words settled over the room like a blanket. Amara bowed one last time before stepping off the mat. As she walked back toward her mother, every student she passed bowed their heads respectfully, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. It was as if she carried an invisible light around her, something pure and steady that everyone could feel. When she reached her mother, Danielle knelt down and pulled her into a tight embrace. You did amazing, baby, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Amara smiled softly, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. I just remembered what Dad said. What's that? Danielle asked, holding her closer. Amara looked up, her eyes bright. He said, when people doubt you, don't prove them wrong. Just show them who you are. Danielle closed her eyes, letting a tear slip down her cheek. The words felt like her husband was right there in the room, watching, smiling. As they stood up to leave, the crowd parted for them. The students bowed again, even the older ones. And Sensei Roberts, a man who had trained for 20 years, bowed the deepest. Before they stepped outside, Roberts called out, Amara? She turned back politely. He smiled. Anytime you want to train here, the mat is yours. Amara bowed again. Thank you, Sensei. As she and her mother walked out into the sunlight, the dojo stayed silent behind them. Nobody spoke for several moments, not even the instructors. Finally, one of the students broke the silence. Sensei, he said, I think we all just saw something special. Roberts nodded slowly, his eyes still on the door where Amara had disappeared. No, he said quietly. We saw something true. He turned toward the class, his tone firm but soft. Let that remind you, never judge someone by how small they look. Strength isn't in the body, it's in the spirit. And with that, he bowed once more, almost himself, as if bowing to the lesson life had just handed him. The dojo, once filled with chatter and ego, now carried something else entirely. Humility, reverence, and a memory none of them would ever forget. That day, a little girl named Amara didn't just win a sparring match. She won hearts. And she reminded everyone that true power doesn't shout. It moves in silence. The lesson that spread beyond the dojo. The next morning, the dojo didn't feel the same. The sunlight that streamed through the windows seemed warmer somehow, softer, gentler, as if it too remembered what had happened the day before. The mats, the punching bags, the mirrors, everything carried a faint echo of the moment when silence had fallen over the room, right before a little girl reminded everyone what true strength looked like. Sensei Roberts arrived early, as he always did. But this time, he didn't go straight to stretching or checking equipment. He walked slowly across the floor, stopping right where Amara had stood, that small space in the center of the mat that suddenly felt sacred. He looked down, replaying the memory in his mind. The way she'd moved, light but sure. The way she'd looked at him, calm, fearless. The way she'd bowed, with more respect than some adults ever showed. He smiled quietly to himself. She changed the whole room, he whispered. A few minutes later, the first group of students began to arrive. But instead of their usual chatter and laughter, There was a hush about them. When they bowed at the entrance, they did it more deliberately. When they tied their belts, they did it carefully. It was subtle, but Roberts could feel it. Amara had left something behind. Even the assistant instructors noticed. "The kids are different today," one of them said. "They're quieter." Roberts nodded. "Good," he said. "They're thinking." As the class began, Roberts gathered everyone in a circle. The students sat cross-legged, waiting for instruction. He didn't start with drills. He didn't talk about kicks or punches or stances. Instead, he said, "Yesterday, we all saw something we'll never forget." The room stayed silent. Everyone knew what he meant. Roberts continued, his voice calm and steady. "That little girl, Amara, came here to train, not to prove anything. But she ended up teaching all of us. She showed us that respect and focus matter more than strength." He looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. "You laughed when she stepped on the mat. You judged her before she even bowed. But when she moved, you felt something, didn't you?" A few students nodded shyly. Robert smiled faintly. "That feeling, that's humility. And if you carry it with you, you'll become better martial artists and better people." From that day on, things began to change inside the dojo. The students trained harder, but with a different kind of energy. When they sparred, they didn't try to overpower each other. They tried to understand each other's movement, just like Amara had done. When someone fell, they helped them up without hesitation. Even the youngest students, who used to copy flashy kicks from movies, now spent more time practicing their balance, their breathing, their focus. Something about that day had settled deep into their hearts. Danielle and Amara didn't come back to the dojo immediately. They thought it was just a one-time visit, a simple trial class. But 2 weeks later, they received a message from Sensei Roberts. It read, "Amara's presence left a mark here. The students talk about her every day. I'd be honored if she continued her training with us." When Danielle read the message aloud, Amara smiled softly. "He's a good teacher," she said simply. Danielle nodded, her heart full. "And you're a good student." The following Saturday, Amara returned. When she walked into the dojo, everything stopped. Again, conversations faded, heads turned, and then one by one, every student stood and bowed toward her. It wasn't planned. It wasn't forced. It was instinct. Amara, slightly shy, bowed back. Sensei Robert stepped forward, his eyes warm. "Welcome back, warrior," he said. From that moment, something special began to grow inside those walls. Amara wasn't treated like a child prodigy or some kind of legend. She trained just like everyone else. But her quiet focus lifted everyone around her. When other kids struggled, she encouraged them. When someone made a mistake, she smiled and said, "Try again. You'll get it." When a student got frustrated, she reminded them softly, "It's not about being the strongest. It's about staying calm." It was like her father's wisdom had been passed through her, flowing into everyone who trained beside her. Soon, her story began to spread beyond the dojo. Parents who hadn't even been there started talking about the little girl who humbled the black belt. Some thought it was exaggerated. Others came to see for themselves. But those who witnessed her train quickly realized the truth. She wasn't show-off. She was something far rarer. She was genuine. A local martial arts blog heard about the story and wrote a small piece. A black belt challenged a little girl as a joke, but left the mat with a new understanding of discipline and respect. The post spread like wildfire. Comments poured in from teachers, parents, and martial artists around the country. That's what the world needs. Kids who lead with humility. She reminded me why I started martial arts in the first place. Respect to that girl and her sensei. But Amara never read any of it. She didn't even know her story had gone viral. To her, it was just about learning, growing, and honoring her father's memory. One evening, as class ended and the students bowed out, Sensei Roberts approached Danielle. "You know," he said, watching Amara help another kid fix her belt. "She's special, but not just because she's talented. It's her heart. She doesn't fight for attention. She fights for understanding." Danielle smiled softly. Her dad always said the same thing. He believed that strength is quiet, and that the loudest ones usually have the least to say. Roberts nodded. He was a wise man. As the weeks went by, Amar's influence only deepened. The dojo grew closer, more respectful, more united. Even Roberts found himself training differently, with more patience, more mindfulness. He no longer saw martial arts as competition or control. He saw it as connection. And it all began with that one unexpected match, a moment born from a joke that turned into a lifelong lesson. Every new student who joined the dojo heard the story. It became part of its identity. The tale of the day, a small girl reminded everyone that greatness doesn't come from power, but from peace. Whenever Roberts looked at the photo wall, lined with pictures of students in tournaments and ceremonies, he always left one empty frame in the center. Not for a trophy, not for a medal, but for the memory of that moment, the day silence fell over the gym, the day humility won over pride, the day Amara showed what real strength looked like. The tournament of truth. Months passed, and Amara's name had quietly become a legend within the dojo walls. She wasn't famous, not in the way most people think of fame. She didn't have crowds following her or videos going viral on her phone. She barely used it. Her fame was different. It was earned. It was spoken about softly in conversations, with respect in every word. So when Sensei Roberts announced that the dojo would be competing in a regional martial arts tournament, the students were thrilled. It was the biggest event of the year. Dozens of schools, hundreds of competitors, an audience that filled entire gymnasiums. But when Amara's name appeared on the roster, the room fell silent for a moment. One of the older students, a tall 15-year-old named Marcus, looked at her with curiosity. "You're competing?" he asked. Amara nodded simply. "Sensei said it's a good way to learn." Marcus smiled, trying to be polite, but he couldn't hide the doubt in his eyes. He'd been training for years and had a shelf full of medals. "It's tough out there," he said. "They don't go easy." Amara looked up at him, her expression calm. "They don't have to." There was again that quiet confidence that made everyone stop and think. When the day of the tournament arrived, the entire dojo gathered at the city sports center. The air buzzed with energy. Kids stretching, instructors barking last-minute advice, parents cheering from the bleachers. Danielle sat in the crowd, clutching a small charm necklace her husband used to wear. She wasn't nervous. She was proud. Proud that her daughter wasn't there to win, but to grow. Amara stood beside Sensei Roberts, watching as the divisions were announced. She was in the under-12 category, small, yet fierce among children much larger and older than her. When her name was called, a murmur ran through the audience. "That's the little girl from the story," someone whispered. "The one who beat the black belt." Cameras turned. Parents leaned forward. Even other senseis from different dojos whispered to each other. Some smiled. Some didn't believe the rumors. But Amara didn't notice any of it. She stepped onto the mat, bowed to her opponent, and waited. Her first match was against a girl almost a head taller, muscles tense, fists clenched tight. The referee raised his hand. "Hajime!" The match began. The taller girl came in fast, aggressive, confident. She swung quick strikes, hoping to overwhelm Amara early. But Amara moved like she always did. Smooth, graceful, focused. Every time a strike came, she flowed around it, redirecting the energy instead of meeting it head-on. She wasn't fighting, she was understanding. Then, in one swift motion, Amara pivoted, using her opponent's momentum against her, and lightly tapped the girl's torso with a perfect counter-strike. "Point, Amara." The referee's voice echoed. The crowd gasped. Then, applause. Her mother smiled softly from the stands. She knew that move. Her husband used to practice it at home. The next round went the same way, calm, clean, and respectful. Amara didn't rush. She didn't celebrate after points. She bowed after every match, even to opponents who refused to bow back. By the semifinals, people had stopped seeing her as a little girl. They saw her as a martial artist. But it was the final match that truly tested her spirit. Her opponent was Marcus, the same boy from her dojo, older, stronger, more experienced. He was good, really good, and everyone knew it. Before the match, Sensei Roberts called them both over. "Remember," he said, "winning isn't everything. Honor is." They nodded. When the match started, the tension was electric. The crowd had grown quiet, everyone watching closely. Marcus moved first, fast and sharp. His strikes were technical, his footwork flawless. He landed the first point easily. "Point, Marcus." The scoreboard lit up, but Amara didn't flinch. She simply reset her stance and breathed. Marcus came again, faster, stronger. He was determined to prove himself. But Amara's eyes stayed calm, reading his every move like words in a book. She waited for the perfect moment. And then it came. As Marcus lunged forward, Amara stepped slightly to the side and caught his sleeve mid-motion. Using his own momentum, she turned, swept her leg, and brought him off balance, not with power, but with timing so perfect it looked effortless. Marcus hit the mat, eyes wide in shock. The crowd gasped again. Even the referees looked impressed. Amara stepped back immediately and bowed. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Marcus blinked, then smiled a little. Yeah, I'm okay." The referee raised his hand. "Point, Amara." Now it was tied, 1-1. The final round would decide everything. The tension was thick. The crowd leaned forward. Marcus and Amara circled each other slowly, both breathing hard now. The world seemed to fall away. No crowd, no noise, no cameras. Just two students, two hearts, two lessons meeting in motion. Marcus struck first. A sharp high kick, but Amara ducked under it, stepped forward, and stopped her hand an inch from his chest. "Point, Amara." The buzzer went off. For a second, nobody moved. Then, applause erupted across the gym. People stood, clapping, cheering, some even shouting her name. But Amara didn't celebrate. She simply bowed deeply. First to Marcus, then to the referee, and finally to the crowd. When she turned towards Sensei Roberts, he was already standing, his hands together in pride. Danielle had tears in her eyes, clutching the charm tightly. After the ceremony, Marcus approached her with a shy grin. "You got me fair and square," he said. "Guess I still have a lot to learn." Amara smiled softly. "We both do." He laughed. "You're something else, you know that?" She shrugged lightly. "Dad used to say, the best fighters never fight with anger." Roberts, overhearing her, nodded. "And today, you proved him right again." The tournament director approached and handed her the small gold trophy. It wasn't huge, but it shone brightly in her small hands. Reporters wanted interviews. Parents wanted photos. But Amara didn't care about any of that. She walked to the edge of the mat, placed the trophy down, and bowed again to the space itself. Danielle watched with quiet tears. Her little girl wasn't just fighting opponents. She was honoring something much greater. That day, the audience didn't just see a champion. They saw a lesson. That humility is stronger than ego. That silence can speak louder than victory. And that sometimes the smallest fighter carries the biggest heart. The story that touched the world. The video began as a shaky recording. Someone's phone, propped up on a bleacher, capturing a small girl in a white GI standing calmly before a much larger boy. It wasn't edited, wasn't planned. Just raw, honest footage of the tournament that day. But what no one could predict was what would happen next. That video, the one where a little black girl named Amara bowed before her opponent, fought with grace, and ended the match with humility, spread like wildfire. By the next morning, it had thousands of views. By the end of the week, millions. People didn't just see a martial arts match. They saw something deeper. They saw courage that didn't need noise, strength that didn't demand power, and a little girl who reminded the world that greatness can come in the smallest, quietest forms. News stations began calling the dojo. Headlines appeared everywhere. Newspaper, Little Girl's Grace in Tournament inspires millions. Newspaper, the young martial artist who redefined strength. Newspaper, Meet Amara, the girl who silenced a gym and moved the internet. Sensei Roberts couldn't believe it. "I just wanted her to compete," he told one reporter. I didn't realize she'd teach the world a lesson while doing it. Danielle watched every story with tears in her eyes. The world was finally seeing what she had always known. Her daughter's strength didn't come from her fists, but from her heart. She remembered how people used to look at Amara, how they'd underestimate her, pity her, or even ignore her. But now, those same people were sending letters, flowers, and messages of encouragement. One day, their small mailbox overflowed with letters from children across the country. A boy wrote, "I used to get bullied too, but now I want to be brave like Amara." A girl said, "I didn't think I could do martial arts because I'm small, but you show me I can." Danielle sat on the porch, reading them aloud as Amara quietly painted next to her, a small smile on her face. When Danielle asked, "How does it feel knowing so many people are inspired by you?" Amara shrugged softly. "It feels nice, but I just did what Dad taught me." Those simple words melted her mother's heart, but the story didn't stop there. Soon, local news stations wanted interviews. Then national outlets called, then international ones. The dojo's phone rang constantly. Parents wanted to enroll their kids. Journalists wanted statements. TV producers wanted appearances. But through it all, Amara stayed the same. Quiet, polite, and humble, she still showed up to class on time. Still bowed to every student. Still helped clean the mats after everyone left. Even Jake, the boy who once mocked her, the one who started it all, returned to the dojo one afternoon, nervous but determined. He found her sitting alone, tying her belt. "Hey," he began quietly. Amara looked up. "Hi, Jake." He shifted awkwardly. I saw your video. Everyone's talking about it. You're amazing." She smiled slightly. "Thank you." He hesitated, then said softly, "I wanted to say I'm sorry for the way I acted before. I was being stupid." Amara tilted her head, studying him for a moment. Then she said, "You weren't stupid. You were learning." That sentence hit him harder than any punch could. Jake nodded slowly. "Do you think you could teach me sometime? I mean, how you move like that?" Amara smiled wider. "Sensei says we all teach each other. So yes." From that day forward, Jake changed. He trained harder, not to prove anything, but to learn. Sensei Roberts noticed the shift too. "Funny," he told Danielle one evening after class, "how the student everyone doubted became the teacher no one expected." The story reached even higher. Martial arts organizations invited Amara to speak. Schools requested motivational visits. Parents told her story to their children before bedtime. But the moment that touched everyone's heart came months later, when Amara was invited to an international youth martial arts seminar, a stage filled with prodigies, champions, and young athletes from all over the world. The host introduced her last. "Our next guest may be small," he said, smiling, "but her story carries the weight of a world's worth of inspiration." Amara stepped onto the stage in her white GI, her belt neatly tied. Cameras flashed. Crowds whispered. She walked a microphone, paused for a moment, and then said softly, "My name is Amara. I don't fight people. I fight fear, doubt, and anger, the things that stop us from being kind." The crowd grew still. You could hear the breath of every person in the hall. She continued, "My dad used to say that the strongest person isn't the one who hit hardest. It's the one who stays calm when life tries to hit them. That's what I try to remember every day." When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. People stood, clapping, cheering, some even crying. But Amara didn't bask in it. She simply bowed and whispered, "Thank you." That short, humble speech was shared around the world, viewed by millions, quoted in classrooms, and even used in leadership seminars. It wasn't about martial arts anymore. It was about life. It was about a little girl who turned pain into peace, mockery into motivation, and discipline into a form of love. Back home, Danielle watched the speech replay online. She could see her husband in Amara's calm smile, in her stillness, in the gentle way she carried herself. When Amara came home that night, Danielle hugged her tightly and whispered, "Your father would be so proud of you." Amara looked up, her eyes warm and bright. "He's always here, Mom. Every time I bow." Danielle couldn't hold back her tears. Outside, the dojo lights glowed softly against the night sky. Inside, a wall of photos showed generations of students, and in the center, a new one had been added. Amara, the girl who silenced the gym and inspired the world. But to her, it was never about fame or recognition. It was about keeping a promise to her father, to her mother, and to herself that she would live with courage, kindness, and respect. And as she sat that night, her trophy gleaming quietly on the shelf, Amara whispered to herself the same words her father once told her. Real strength isn't shown by how loud you are. It's shown by how peaceful you remain when the world tries to shake you. And that, more than any trophy or headline, was her greatest victory. Years passed, but the story of that day, the day the little black girl silenced the whole gym, never faded. The dojo grew larger, brighter, filled with students from every background imaginable. On its walls hung medals, photos, and newspaper clippings. But the most treasured one was still that same photo of Amara bowing after her final match. Time had changed many things. The world had moved on to new headlines and new stories. But within those walls, Amara's story lived on, told again and again to every new student who walked through the door. And Amara? She had grown. Now 17, she stood taller, her stance steadier, her movements even more graceful than before. Her face had matured, but her eyes still carried that same calm spark, the one that made people feel both safe and inspired. Sensei Roberts had retired a year earlier, passing the role of junior instructor to her. He'd said with a proud smile, "You've got something that can't be taught, Amara. You lead not by fear or authority, but by presence." And he was right. She didn't raise her voice during training. She didn't need to. Her students, some older, some younger, listened because they wanted to, not because they had to. Among them was a little girl named Lila. She was shy, nervous, and small, just like Amara had been once. The first time she came to class, she'd hidden behind her mother's leg, whispering that she didn't belong there. Amara knelt beside her and smiled gently. "You don't have to be strong today," she said. "Just brave enough to start." Those words stayed with Lila forever. Weeks turned into months, and soon Lila began to shine, her movements smoother, her confidence growing with every bow, every lesson. And all the while, she looked up to Amara like she was more than a teacher, like she was a symbol of what was possible. One day after class, Lila asked, "Sensei Amara, were you ever scared when you started?" Amara paused, smiled softly, and replied, "Every single day. But my dad once told me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you are." The little girl nodded, her eyes wide with admiration. Later that night, as the dojo emptied, Amara sat alone on the mat. The room was silent, lit only by the soft glow of the evening sun through the windows. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment, she could almost feel her father sitting beside her again, the way he used to when she was little, his gentle voice guiding her through each movement. Remember, his voice echoed in her heart. Real strength begins here. He'd tap her chest, right where her heart beat. She smiled faintly. Even now, years later, she still lived by those words. Then something unexpected happened. A visitor entered the dojo, a man in a clean white GI, older now, his posture still strong. Amara looked up, surprised for a moment, and then her face broke into a smile. "Jake?" she said. He grinned. "Hey, champ." Jake had grown too, older, wiser. After years of training, he'd become a respected instructor in another city, working with troubled youth and using martial arts to teach them discipline and peace. "I was in town," he said, setting his bag down. "Thought I'd visit the person who started it all." Amara laughed softly. "I didn't start anything." Jake shook his head. "You started everything. I used to think fighting was about strength. You taught me it's about character." They bowed, then trained together for old time's sake, not as rivals, not as teacher and student, but as equals. The sound of their movements, crisp, fluid, balanced, filled the dojo like music. Afterward, they sat side by side on the floor, breathing quietly. Jake looked around at the photos on the wall. "You know," he said, "your story's still everywhere. My students talk about you like you're some kind of legend." Amara chuckled softly. "I'm not a legend, just a girl who didn't give up." He smiled. Maybe that's exactly what a legend is. Before he left, Jake handed her something, an old photo, faded but familiar. It was from that very first day, years ago, when the black belt had jokingly asked her to fight. A stranger had captured it. Amara standing calmly, small and fearless in the center of a gym full of laughter. "I thought you should have this," Jake said. Amara held the photo carefully. Her eyes softened. "Thank you." After he left, she placed it on the wall beside her father's framed picture. Two moments frozen in time, one where her journey began and one where it continued. That night, Danielle stopped by the dojo. Her hair had streaks of silver now, but her smile was the same. She watched as her daughter taught her final class of the evening, pride shining in her eyes. When the students bowed and left, she walked over and hugged Amara tightly. "You've made this place into something beautiful," she whispered. Amara smiled. "You and Dad made me into something beautiful first." Danielle's eyes welled with tears. He'd be so proud. You kept the spirit alive in every lesson. Amara looked around the quiet dojo. The mats, the photos, the echoes of laughter and discipline. "He's still here, Mom," she said softly. "Every time someone bows, every time someone learns respect." Outside, the sky was dark now, stars glimmering faintly above the street. As they locked up and walked home together, a soft breeze passed through the trees. It felt like a whisper, like a thank you. Years later, that little girl named Lila would grow up, win tournaments, and one day tell her own students about her first teacher, the calm, strong, humble girl named Amara. And just like that, the circle would continue, one generation passing on strength to the next, not through fear or pride, but through kindness, humility, and heart. The world would forget many things, but not this story. Because sometimes the most powerful moments don't come from grand speeches or big victories. They come from a small girl standing tall, refusing to let the world decide her worth, and showing that the truest strength of all is peace. And in that quiet dojo, under the soft glow of the fading light, the legend of Amara, the girl who silenced the gym, lived on, not in the noise of applause, but in the silence of respect, not in trophies, but in the hearts she changed. And every bow, every whisper of Sensei Amara was proof that her father's lesson, that true power is gentle, had echoed across